Welcome. We have a wonderful story that I think will really inspire the viewers. Sara has had an experience that's quite unusual, and we want to share that with you. So first of
Thank
all,
you.
it's obviously you're very young.
Yes.
And this happened a year ago, was it?
Yes, absolutely. And for the viewers' benefit, I'm 41, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer 5 months ago at age 40.
So obviously, you did something quite unusual to be, diagnosed that early.
Sure.
How did your story start out?
So I'm one of the fortunate ones, I like to call myself, because I had an OBG who agreed with me that I had a strong family history. Strong family history can be a relative term. Does that mean your mother has to have this? Does that mean your sister has to? What does this mean? My history was on my father's side, which often gets dismissed, as you know.
Exactly.
There's this misconception that I obviously didn't get my breast from my father, so I couldn't get breast cancer from his family. Total myth, of course. And I had a grandmother on my dad's side that died at 35.
That's
so
a big red flag.
Quite young.
And yet all the stuff you read says, well, if you don't have a first-degree relative or maybe two first-degree relatives, you don't need to worry too much about it.
Yeah.
And here, I don't know, did you qualify for actual gene testing with that?
Well, thanks to your office, we did a lot of fighting with insurance companies, right? So again, if you don't fall into these certain categories, you find yourself in a situation where your doctor may consider you high risk. You may know that you're high risk yourself, which I did, but the insurance company may not agree, and that's a whole other struggle. Luckily, working with Breastlink, specifically Jennifer Swisher, I give her a lot of credit, your physician's assistant. Yeah, she helped me fight for that, and I did get the genetic testing.
And then you did have
I had an ATM gene mutation, not the BRCA, the Angelina Jolie that everyone's familiar with, but I had an ATM gene mutation, which meant a 52, I'm going to make sure I get this stat right, 52 to 69% lifetime risk of breast cancer.
So just to clarify that, because this is an important issue and it gets a little complicated for this discussion, but with Angelina Jolie, it was the common BRCA1 that she had, and that puts her at an 85% lifetime risk, and that's why she underwent prophylactic mastectomy. That drops her risk almost to zero. So
Exactly.
But everybody now seems to be well aware of the BRCA mutation,
right.
But now we're testing for 17 other high-risk mutations, and so some of them are just a slightly higher risk, and some of them are kind of in the middle, like yours were. But you take a woman in her late 30s, is that
sure? Yeah, at the time I was 38.
What was the lifetime risk that you were told?
52% to 69%.
So over half of the women will end up with breast cancer at some time if they live to be, 85, or I think that's the standard endpoint.
Right.
So at that point, did you even consider prophylactic mastectomy?
We talked about it. You and I had talked about it. We did not. The statistics were a little lower than the dreaded BRCA that everyone's heard of. And so we decided we'd very closely monitor me, and not with just traditional methods, which would be the mammogram, but with 3D mammogram, MRI, and exams with you every 6 months. And we started that immediately.
And that was, what age did you start that?
38.
38. How did you feel about going in for your 6-monthly exams or MRIs or whatever? How much stress was that for you?
I always took the approach, and I've shared this with family and friends, and it's just my little analogy, but with every life-threatening situation, I think you can be a lion or a sheep. And I was going to be the lion.
Good for you.
I was going to know that God gave me modern medicine, modern technology, doctors like yourself, a strong will, an education, things that helped me realize I am at risk and I need to take charge of this. And I'm going to be the lion. I'm going to know I'm strong. I'm not going to go out in fear. I'm going to know that I'm going to find this one day and I'm going to conquer it, as opposed to being, a sheep. Either ignorant, or in fear.
We've got to clone you. This is the greatest attitude going. Hold that thought, sorry. Oh, it fell down. How about that?
So you're going to pick up at it. We've got to clone you.
Okay. Oh, so I just lost that. That's all we lost.
But it was scratching.
That's all right. That's right.
We got to clone you, and you're going to laugh like you just did.
Okay.
Or we've got to clone that attitude. Maybe that would be a more specific.
Okay.
That was just great. We've got to clone that attitude. If we could just transfer that on to every woman and giving, because it's not that easy for a lot of women, and being a sheep is a normal thing. I don't think we can look at that and fault them for it. They are what they are, and they're doing their best. But we do try to help them become lions.
Of course.
And they can become lions, but they have to have faith that given the proper support, they will become lions. So
Absolutely.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and to clarify, it's certainly not an insult to the woman who is too scared to do something or too ignorant. You can't help ignorance. If no one's ever educated you, it is what it is, right? But for me, I had a choice.
Yes.
I could decide, am I going to be the sheep? And the answer was no. So for me, those tests and the coming in every 6 months, I was taking charge. Okay. I was going to find this, I was going to get ahead of it, and I was going to beat this when we found it. And for me, it was a matter of when, not if.
Okay, so I know your story, so I'm going to ask you some leading questions here. But so you had your first MRI at what age?
38.
And your mammograms and everything, your exams,
everything was clear. Yeah, okay. I was never referred because I was symptomatic in any way. So everything was clear to this point.
So you were then due for your next, how many MRIs did you have?
I've had 2 breast, and these are breast
specific
MRIs.
MRIs.
Yes, breast
so
specific.
So the first one was negative. You came in a year later, your mammogram's negative, your exam's negative.
Completely
you don't feel
clear.
anything. I didn't feel anything. And we recommended an MRI if my memory serves me right.
And it's you're leading me into a great story. Again, I go back to Jennifer Swisher, your PA. Jennifer had called me and said, Sarah, I think we need to do another MRI. And I says, this was the one time I was the sheep, I'm being the sheep. I said, Jennifer, these MRIs aren't fun. A breast MRI is a fairly invasive procedure, and it's not fun. And, I said, we just went through this, a year ago. Why again? And she said, Sarah, I just keep going back to your history. Your grandmother was 35. She wasn't 50. She wasn't an elderly woman. She wasn't a grandma, and we talked about that. I never met this woman. My dad lost his mother. She said that is just such an unusual statistic that you're going to do this MRI. And I said, oh, I am. And she said, yes, you are.
She's a lion also.
She is a lion, and my lion. And she pushed that MRI. And I says, oh, Jennifer, we're going to have to fight the insurance company again, back to that point. And she says, and that's what we'll do. Let me take care of that. You just get your butt down there and get that MRI. And I did. Yeah.
You want to tell a story?
And that MRI caught my cancer.
Yes.
Is the short story. The longer version, of course, is that you get a phone call that the MRI picked up something abnormal, but it's very small. You need to come in. You need to meet with Dr. West. And of course, as a survivor, all you hear is the MRI caused something. The room goes sort of still. It's hard to explain. You can hear your own heartbeat, things like that. Even you may think you're a lion, but in that moment, this is real. This is happening. This is what I knew would probably happen, but it's here.
Yeah.
And I knew, my point is, I knew at that moment, we hadn't done a biopsy, I hadn't even seen you, I knew what I was dealing with. Yeah. And so from there, I did come in, had the biopsy. I believe I tried to even pressure you to diagnose me while you were doing the biopsy. I just said, what do you see in there? I know this is cancer, Dr. West. Let's just call it what it is. You said, well, that's not really appropriate. We need to get the pathology. But the point being, I was one of the few, and again, it's because of that family history at such a young age that I knew what I was dealing with.
Right. Yeah. So when you did get that and everything went blank and you could hear your heartbeat, at some point you were a sheep.
Oh,
yeah. So
again,
at what point did you make
go back
this
to that
conversion? Was there anything specific you did? Was it time just worked itself out? Was it your basic personality?
Sure. It was pretty immediate. I hung up the phone from that initial phone call, and everyone has their go-to. I'm a person of faith, so for me it was immediate prayer, and I'm not talking about dramatic formal prayer. I'm talking about just, God, I'm here and I need you. My first thoughts were for my family, specifically my father. I knew this would be very difficult for my husband, and I don't mean to dismiss that, but I don't have children. I knew I could get my husband on board. He would follow suit with me. I was going to be a lion. I'm going to tell him he's going to be a lion. But my father lost his mother at 11. To look that man in the eye and tell him the same disease that took your mother's life your aunt's life. Your daughter has it now.
Right.
And I'm 40 years old, and I've got a deadly disease.
Right.
That just took over. And so in this prayer, it was really, you know, God, I need to be strong, and I need to be strong now for my family. I was not worried about surgeries, treatments, anything I would have to go through. My thoughts were for my family, and I was determined in that moment. I said, God, you know, bring something beautiful out of this. Show my family a different outcome than what they're used to. So it was pretty immediate.
You're going to make me cry. No, your story is absolutely amazing and from the heart. I think you can't help but listen to what you say and want to be a lion, but realize that you can turn this thing around. Most people don't turn it around like that. And I think there's a lot of people, you know Barbara Scott, who we've interviewed here. She was sitting with her doctor. She was diagnosed at 34, 36. She's got a lung full of metastases. The doctor tells her she has a year to live, and she gets a book. She had nowhere to go. She was all alone. And at some point, she found a book about survivors, and she read about one breast cancer patient. She said, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And she could feel herself turn around. I had another patient that she had a very favorable breast cancer, low grade, small, nice location, easy lumpectomy. She couldn't come around, couldn't accept it. She just couldn't be a lion. And she went to her church, had an evening dinner, and the group had found out about her diagnosis, so they all stood around in a...
yeah. That'll get
you.
Yeah.
It did turn her around. I mean, just the support of her friends, she felt this warmth in her body. Somebody was taking care of her.
Certainly, and it does, again, my disclaimer, I had a lifetime to prepare for this.
Yeah.
You know, call it what you will. I like to think that God put it on my heart at a very young age that I would get this. And not in a morbid, doom and gloom sort of way, oh, this is coming, you know, the weight of the world is on me. But just in a, I need to be a lion, I need to be looking for this, I need to, you know, take charge of my own health. You know, perhaps my grandmother being a guardian angel, in defense of other survivors, they don't have that preparation. Someone's coming to you out of nowhere, you've had no family history, you don't have the genetic mutation I had, and they're telling you that you might die. You need a moment,
You're right.
you know, or a few moments. Yeah. I had an instant moment because of my preparation.
Yeah. I guess that was a good thing. I don't know. It is what it is, and each woman is different, and I don't think it's so difficult to make any generalizations, but I do think that there is a lot of support out there, and you think positive, and you appreciate the fact of the incredible progress that's been made, our ability to take on what were previously such difficult situations and turn them around. So I think having hope, getting that hope is really boosts your immune system. I think it increases your chance for survival. I think there's everything good about it. But
absolutely,
if we could just clone your lionness, that would be quite nice.
Well, and part of it was your staff. Again, you know, I go back to I had Jennifer Swisher, I had my team already. Yeah. A lot of women are meeting their team in the midst of this diagnosis. Yeah. My team was built. We were armed. We were ready for this.
Well, let's hope that this story, you know, reaches a lot of women. I think that this is the kind of inspirational story that we hear in different ways from different people, but most people do reach the situation where they can become a lion. They can roll up their sleeves. They can fight back. And I think at that point, their immune system is energized. I think it's so important to think positive, to allow your immune system to do its job, and to recognize that we've made such tremendous progress in terms of early detection and treatment, and that everybody has a major probability of doing extraordinarily well. It's just a matter of finding that hope.